Welcome back everyone to the session 2 of our day 3 of our workshop. We'll begin the session and I would like to call Dr. Swetha Antony to the dais. Now I request Dr. Rekha Parmar to chair the session and facilitate Dr. Antony with the university case. Swetha Antony is a journalist whose fingers are dipped in multiple fields of literature and humanities. She has a PhD in English literature from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, India. Her doctoral research work on the poetry of Kamala Das is broadly oriented towards post-colonial theories and literatures, with special focus on the language questions and theories of cosmopolitanism. She has forayed into tantalizing areas of food studies by co-editing with Elizabeth M. the volume Beyond the Superficial, Making Sense of Food in a Globalized World, Oxford Interdisciplinary Press. She has delivered various talks focusing on the paradigms of critical food studies within English studies in India. The notion of third culture, third space in contemporary literature and popular culture is also an overarching critical context to her work with respect to her engagement with food studies. Film studies, visuality studies, Kerala studies, sports studies, disability studies, and environmental humanities. Her ongoing research is on the larger impact of Portuguese colonialism and the origin and evolution of Latin Catholic community in Kerala, which has led to her engagement with the relationship between art, literature, and environment. Her most recent academic collaboration involved her engagement with medical humanities through the translation of Shiba's EK Malayalam short story, Surgeon, for the anthology Medical Maladies, Stories of Disease and Cure from Indian Languages. Niyogi Books, edited and introduced by Harris Kadir. She is also research affiliate for the project on ADHD graphic medical narratives with Indian University, Southeast New Albany, USA, which led to her engagement with graphic medicine. She works as an assistant professor in the Department of English Faculty, Faculty of Arts, University of Delhi. I now request Dr. Rekha Parmar to take over the session.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. All are alive, no? Yes. Sitting here or dreaming? Respected Dr. Mahesh Day, our HOD, and all my staff, and all my students, research scholars, and all friends. Today we have gathered here, you know, that Dr. Swetha Antony, she will speak on shifting paradigms of this research in both classrooms. So this is a very interesting topic. I hope you will like it, enjoy it. So you can ask questions later on. I invite ma'am to deliver her speech.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I thank the department for this opportunity and Mihir for initiating the whole thing. And today I'm going to talk a bit about how we do research within English studies by looking at the evolution of what we understand as what we do within English studies departments. Dr. Tarakeshwar has already taken you through the history of English departments in India and across the world. So you have a general idea of that as well. So I'm going to look specifically from the 1980s to the present, which led to Department of English being called English Studies Department, right? I'm going to begin with a simple question. Have you heard about Darwin's theory of evolution?
Yes.
What does it say? Survival of the
Survival of the
fittest.
fittest.
Then there is the theory of natural selection. Yeah. So how would you define the fit test? Adaptation, right? So Darwin said that whichever species or whichever members of a species is able to adapt to change faster would survive, would be selected, right? So as far as the English studies departments are concerned, we are in a way doing that. We are naturally selected as far as research is concerned, or we have, or we should have the capacity to adapt to the changes that is coming in. And another aspect that is central to the evolution of the departments of English would be this whole process of learning to unlearn. And specifically when you're doing research, it's something that you need to hold on to. And I'm sure that you must have experienced it when you were doing your undergraduation. You would have looked at texts in a different way, and when you come to the postgraduate level, the same things, same texts are introduced to you in a different manner. So the first step when you enter research is to learn to unlearn. And also when you are postgraduate students, you're kind of beginning to do research on your own, read on your own. So today I'm going to talk about how to do research in the age of post-truth, uh, in the age where we value differences, in the age where we believe in true universality, and where texts have gone on to become context, or the relevance of text is largely within the idea of context. So my lecture is divided into three sections. I'll begin with certain periods in history that have led to the shift, the paradigm shift within English studies. The second part would take you through the idea of text. And in the third part, I'll show you a few samples of text, and we'll have an interactive session. Now, when you're looking at, so this is uh, so my title is Shifting Paradigms of Research in Woke Classrooms. I'll just talk about the two key terms. One is paradigms. Now when you're looking at the term paradigm, it was first used by Thomas Kuhn in 1962 in his work, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, and in which he was talking about how the basic ideas within a field or within a discipline have been contested and debated upon and have been and are proven wrong, which leads to a different way in which we look at the same discipline. A very prominent example would be the Copernican evolution. You know that at some point in history, Earth was considered as center of the universe. You know what that perspective is called? Geocentrism. Yeah, and later on, geocentrism was proven wrong, and it was discovered that sun is the center of the universe, which is known as heliocentrism, right? And one of the things that we do as literature students would be something like this in the current scenario, which is to question Eurocentrism or the idea of a homogenized perspective of things. So that is where the next word, key term in my title comes to the forefront. How many of you have heard about woke? Can you tell me what it means? Where you include everything around you without any bias, without any differences. You rather respect those differences among people. All right. That is woke. So when you look at the word woke, it began with the black communities asking to be recognized as human beings or as at par with the rest of the society. So it involves an engagement with your own identity, an engagement with questioning your perspective on your identity, And it also engages with the idea of differences and of respecting the differences, as you have told me. Now, when you're looking at the current scenario, when you're looking at the shifts within research in English studies, this is something that is important. You acknowledge that differences exist, and it's also important for each one of us to be able to understand those differences, to study those differences, and to engage with that. Now, how did we reach this scenario? Uh, we so in Research Methods for English Studies, edited by Gabriel Griffin, this is a key text for research scholars because it introduces you to the prominent shifts that have come within English studies. And in this work, in the introduction, Gabriel Griffin talks about the shift and what are the prominent reasons for that. And Griffin says, during the second half of the 1990s, when the issue of research training began to creep up on public and institutional agendas, research methods were what academics got others to deliver to their students, mostly in the form of a basic library introduction and basic computing skills. So I don't know how many of you might have gone through this thing where you will write the thesis or dissertation and you take to a center to have it edited, processed, formatted, etc. So at one point within English studies or within departments of English, this whole idea of editing out, printing it out was in a way outsourced to different people, like people having computing skills, etc. But now, and also because of that, uh, the process that goes into or culminates in a dissertation uh, or a thesis was uh, divorced in a way. The process of research in a way was divorced from academic inquiry into the subject, right? Or it was something that a particular group did, right? So the ethos remained that research methods, more commonly understood as research skills, were divorced from the academic inquiry into the subject, that it was librarians and computer technicians' job to deliver relevant training. The word training itself viewed as detracting from higher order intellectual endeavor. And it was a necessary evil than a positive good. So the whole point of saying that you have research skills at that point meant that you have training in computer to help you publish something, as in just to format something. Now, from 2013 onwards, there was research conducted in universities across UK, which pointed to the fact that English studies is no longer, or research within English studies is no longer about textual analysis. We are doing something else, right? And that led to redefining how we do research, right? And which led to the introduction of three different terms when we are doing research. So the first one is research skills, which basically meant that these are techniques that you use for handling material. So what are the prominent, so when you're starting out on research, what do you do? How do you reach a topic? Are you guys sleepy? Not sleepy? Yeah. So what do you do as a first step when you're doing research? You do write assignments, right, as part of the PG program. So how do you start that process of writing an assignment? It's also a research paper. Questions. You ask questions. You ask questions to what? To whom? To yourself? Alright. But where does the text come in?
In a society, there are things going on around us. There are texts we read. There are questions that we ask ourselves and at times to the professors.
Okay.
What if this or that? And then somehow we reach to a conclusion whether a topic.
Alright. So So basically you engage with data, right? So you collect data in some form and you kind of, yeah, narrow it down to a particular text or a topic. So research skills basically means doing that, handling material. Okay? So data collection, your skills at coming up with the literature review, working with the bibliography. So basically the first stage of research involves a lot of skills, right? Then the second term that was introduced into English studies was research methods. So what is the prominent method that we follow? Textual analysis. Have you tried anything else? It depends on the topic of your research. What have you tried apart from textual analysis? Comparison. Anything else? Interviews? Have anyone? Surveys. Right? Sorry. Articles. Articles are part of your data collection, right? So it's a skill that you have. So method would be how you deal with the data that you have collected, right? And the last aspect of your research is research methodology, right? So you have collected a lot of data. You have talked with your peers and with your professors about the various aspects that's happening in the society or various ideas that's being circulated within the intellectual space, and you come to a certain niche area that you want to work on, right? So if I'm giving you this title of Feminist Critique of Jane Austen's uh, work, can you identify the method and methodology? A feminist critique of Jane Austen's work. What would you do if you're given a question like this? So feminist perspective would be the methodology, a perspective that you are bringing into the analysis of the text. So when you're given a title like that, you are analyzing the text, you're doing textual analysis, which is your method, and you would be borrowing from feminist theory to look at the text. That would be your methodology. Right? So basically doing research involves three steps and three processes. One would be the pre-writing stage where you are basically collecting data, and then the second stage would be writing, and the last stage would be editing, which is a significant part of your research. And you deal with these three aspects when you are doing research. Now, in the context of India, in the last 5 years, significant shifts have come in with the introduction of national education policy, and this whole idea of pluriversality that I was talking about, the idea of post-truth, is in a way foregrounded because of the national education policy, particularly this section on higher education towards a more holistic and multidisciplinary education. And I'll read this point out. The very idea that all branches of creative human endeavor, including mathematics, science, vocational subjects, professional subjects, and soft skills should be considered arts, has distinctly Indian origins. This notion of a knowledge of many arts, or what in modern times is often called the liberal arts, that's a liberal notion of the arts, must be brought back to Indian education, as it is exactly the kind of education that we required for the 21st century. Which essentially means that if you're doing research within English studies, you need to be aware of various disciplines. All right. Suppose you're doing research on folk songs. What are the aspects that you should be aware of? Folk songs. So it's part of the oral tradition. And culture, region, regional history. Yeah, so you have to be aware of that. And if you're looking at the discipline that engages with it, it's called ethnomusicology, right? So if you are working on folk songs, there's a need for you to be aware of this particular discipline, ethnomusicology, to engage with that, to come up with unique knowledge. And when you're looking at this definition or this aspect of MEP, we'll also remember what Dr. Karageshu was talking about. You're a doctor of philosophy means what? You you have a knowledge of not just your niche area but also of different disciplines that come into play while you were doing your research. Right? Now, the idea of liberal arts has its roots in the Western as in it's an idea borrowed from the university system in the West. If you're looking at Cambridge, all of those universities, and this term meant aimed at imparting general knowledge and developing general intellectual capacities in contrast to a professional vocational technical curriculum. In the medieval European university, the seven liberal arts were grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. In modern colleges and universities, the liberal arts include the study of literature, languages, philosophy, history, mathematics, and sciences as the basis of a general or liberal education. Sometimes the liberal arts curriculum is described as comprehending study of three main branches of knowledge: the humanities, which include literature, language, philosophy, fine art, and history; the physical and biological sciences, and mathematics; and the social sciences. Let me just ask you a simple question. In the various texts that you're studying as part of the curriculum, are there texts that ask you to look at different disciplines? Yes. Give me an example. Psychology. Which text leads you to psychology? Okay. All right. What discipline are you engaging with this? All right. So psychology, maybe a bit of sociology, right? Yeah. All right. So you're getting the idea of liberal arts, right? We are doing what the medieval universities did within English studies. We are engaging with different disciplines. So without engaging with or without opening up our minds to different knowledge systems, it's not possible to do research within every thing. All right. So we all agree on that. Yeah. Now let's move on to the next part of my presentation, which has to do with the idea of text. What is a text? Is it a written document? It's a written document. What about a folk song? You study that, right, with English departments. What about a painting? Is that a text? It's a picture, but I'm asking you whether it can be considered as a text. So you don't look at it as a text, you don't analyze it. So that's not a text then. So would you call that a text? What about a film? You do analyze films, right? So would you call that a text? Yes. All right. So at a certain point in history, like the mid 20th century, there came a shift in the way in which we understand text, which has to do with someone called Ferdinand de Saussure. Yeah. What did he do? He came up with this idea that signifier and signifier. Yeah. So basically, when you're looking at a word, it does not give you a sense of a meaning. It opens up a lot of possibilities. So there is no center in a way, which led to movements such as structuralism and post-structuralism. Right? Now I'm going to refer to Roland Barthes' idea of the death of the author. Yeah? You're familiar with that? What did he say? With the death of the author? Yeah.
No, no. Yeah.
Okay.
That should not be read by looking at the author's background.
Yeah, so we should no longer be associating a text with an author. The text is out there. The text evokes a sense of place, and each reader brings to the text some unique representation, right? So you all agree with that. So this particular idea, in a way, revolutionized the way in which we look at literature, literary analysis. And now I go into what a text is, as defined by Barth, right? A text is made of multiple writings, drawn from many cultures and entering into mutual relations of dialogue. So dialogue is important. You cannot just analyze a text from a single perspective. Parody, contestation, but there is one place where this multiplicity is focused, and that place is the reader. Not as hitherto said the author. The reader is the space on which all quotations that make up a writing are inscribed without any of them being lost. A text unity lies not in its origin but in its destination, which is the reader. Yet this destination cannot any longer be personal. So the reader cannot bring in the personal interventions from their life into the reading of the text, but they should be a bit distanced. This was also something that Dr. Tharadesha was talking about. You have to be objective. Yeah. Yet, yeah, so yet this destination cannot any longer be personal. The reader is without history, biography, psychology. He is simple that someone who holds together in a single field all the traces by which the written text is constituted. Right? So there is this idea that the text is out there for you to play with. And there is this critic called Catherine Belsey, who, in her work, in her essay, Textual Analysis as a Research Method, gives this question to all the researchers. Is the text inviting you to do something? Is there an invitation from the text, right? So when we look at samples of text after this, I'll be asking you to answer this question. Is a particular text inviting you to do something? And if there is an invitation from that text, that is the point that you take up for research. That essentially culminates in your research question, right? Now, another work is by Stanley Fish. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
Which area is he associated with?
Reader response.
Reader response theory, right? So, yeah. So, his famous work is there a text in this class, which I also ask my students because most of them don't believe in bringing text to the classes. But he is doing that from a different perspective, where he puts reader as subject, right? Which brings us to the paradigm shift that I was talking about. Earlier we had literary criticism, as one of you was saying. It engaged with something called biographical criticism, and it had also to do with patronage. You must be familiar with the Battle of Books, Jonathan Swift. Yeah. So what happens there? Yeah. So there is sort of a debate regarding the. So he is writing at a point when the print industry is coming up, and there are a lot of texts that are available, and there were a lot of hack writing that was going on. And you must be familiar with Alexander Pope and Dryden. Yes. They also engaged in this war. Why? Because they had different patrons, and it's important that their work is famous for the patron to acknowledge them. So at that point in time, if you were to critique a work, it was largely a personal attack, right? Rather than engaging in the text as such. So what literary criticism did was to say that the main point of a text is not what is written in it, but this point of identifying that text with a person, right, with an author. So when you put the word author, it kind of comes with this idea of authority. So the idea of literary criticism is that the final say on the text is dependent upon the author. Right? And now we have, with structuralism coming in, we have this way of looking at text, which is called critical theoretical intervention. So you have structuralist perspective, modernist perspective. So there is a different methodological intervention that comes into play while you are analyzing a text. Or the traditional approaches to literary interpretation focus on the author's intention or the text's historical and cultural context, which we call as biographical criticism. Then the meaning of, and in the case of critical theoretical intervention, the meaning of a text is not fixed or objective, but is dependent on the reader's individual perspective and experience. Now, I'll come to this idea that was foregrounded by Stanley Fish, which is interpretive communities. So, as I've said already, he is known as someone who initiated the reader response theory, right? And he calls this community as interpretive community to refer to a group of readers who share similar assumptions, values, and interpretive strategies. And he argues that the meaning of a text is shaped by the interpretive community to which the reader belongs. For example, a reader who is part of an interpretive community which values feminist perspectives may interpret a text differently than a reader who is part of an interpretive community that values traditional gender roles. Right? So you have queer theory coming in, right, which is questioning the earlier intervention into gender studies. So it matters where you belong. It matters whether you're open to new ideas when you are doing research. Right? Now I'm going to the third part of this session. Right? I'm going to give you samples of the text, and I'm going to give you two questions. All right? Is the text inviting you to do something? Not visible. So I need you to write down two questions. One is the text inviting you to do something? Yes. No, you can hold on to your answers. We'll go through all the text and then I'll come back to each text. Right? So should I read out the text? I think that would be easier. Galaxy dosha. From an aerial view, the white batter spreads like the Milky Way to the dark matter Nava. I run my hand in a spiral, making orbits after orbits. Pores appear like planets. My bare eye cannot tell, but I assume I can see the earth right there. I am God, I am allowed to cook up stories. I sprinkle oily stars in the night sky, turn the sun flames high, give it a nice crispy roast, causing global warming. I move the galaxy on a plate and tuck into the misadventures that come with the earth with some blissful coconut chutney. Madhu Raghavendra. Yeah. So the entire piece, what do we call this? Dosa point? Yeah, because it's written like a dosha, yeah. Is the text inviting you to do something? You can write out the points, alright? So first question is the text inviting you to do something? Is it inviting you to think about something differently? And would you be using this text as a primary source if you are doing research? It's a written text. That was one of the debates that we began with. It's a text which has letters in it, words in it. But is it just words? It's structured like a dosha. The moment you see this, you are reminded of an object, a material. There is a materiality that is associated with this, which is why it evokes in you the experience of having a dosha, having eaten a dosha, what do we know about dosha. So all of these questions may come up, right? Why did the author choose dosha? Yeah? No, these are some of the things that comes to my mind, but for you guys it might be something else. So you can just write those points down, alright? I'll come to the explanation of this once you've seen all the text. Is this familiar to anyone? But you just look at the text closely. What are the components that you see? You can just write that down. So the text is not inviting you. Exhibit. Yeah, we'll come to the interpretation later. But this question is this text inviting you to do something? Would you use this as a primary text for your research? No? Or it makes you curious? Alright. That's an important thing when you do research. So I hope you're writing down your first impressions because when we come back to discuss it, I want you to know whether, as in I want you to experience this whole idea of learning to unlearn. Yeah? Shall I move on to the next one? I need more time with this. Yes?
If you don't mind, I'll ask something.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. So my question will be like, before moving towards text is relevant or not. So why I will use this text? Why I will use this as a primary source? That I have a question.
Okay. That's also what I'm trying to say. When you're looking at a text, uh, when you're reading a text, you get a connection to it. Have you connected to a text like that? Can you give me an example?
See, my that whatever you read, according to this, I am connecting with the food only.
Okay,
So,
that's also good.
so my worry is that why I will use in the primary research.
Why would you use that in the primary research?
Yeah,
You don't want to use that, is what you're trying to say.
yeah. Probably if I get satisfactory answer, then I can think. That is my view. Yes.
No, satisfactory answer is not dependent on me, but it's dependent on you.
So yeah, I stuck. So I thought let us ask to you.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that you should remember. You should have some connect to the area that you are working with.
Okay.
So the familiarity with the area is important for you when you start on research. So if you are planning to write a research proposal, you cannot just look at an area that you think is something popular. And if you have not, see, I gave you this example of a feminist critique of Jane Austen's work. if you have not read all of her works, you will not be able to do justice to your research. Just because someone is doing research on that doesn't mean that you have to take that up. So there are some texts that you connect to, there are some texts that you don't connect to. Alright, so you're studying a lot of texts as part of your syllabus. Which is the one text that you hate? You don't hate any text. One text that you have not read. You've read all the texts. Alright. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Don't worry about it. So shall I move on to the next one? Next slide. So I'll read this out. What is this? How would you categorize this? It's a it's a poem. Yeah. So I'll just read it out. The title of the poem is Crab Apples. My mother picked crab apples off the Glasgow apple trees and pounded them with chilies to change her homesickness into green chutney. So how is this text connecting to you? Is it connecting to you? What, from your own experiences, what are the aspects in the text that helps you to identify that this is from a particular line of writing? Are there words that are not familiar to you? Crab apples, are you familiar with crab apples? So there is a element of unfamiliarity. How would you look at that? Are there any words in the poem that gives you a clue about where crab apples might be found? What is it that it evokes in you? Because you would definitely connect to chilies and green chutney, right? Yeah. And there is homesickness. So what is the text inviting you to do? Is it giving you some sense of what the author might be going through? Might have migrated to some other place. How do we know that? Huh? Homesickness. Glasgow apple trees. Alright, so someone from India has migrated to Glasgow, Scotland, and is yearning for beef chutney and just makes do with crab apples. So adding chilies to crab apples. So crab apples is a kind of small apple that is found there, which is not sweet. Yeah. Alright, so how would you categorize this one? Which area would you categorize? Diasporic writing, yeah. Okay, shall I move to the next text? It says chai GPT, genuinely pure tea, enhanced with AI, under the delight shade. Would you, is it inviting you? Would you feel like having a chai right now? So how would you identify this text? It's a trending image. It could be a meme. It could be circulated on Insta or Facebook. Would you study this? Would you research on this? Why? So we have an area called digital humanities that's coming up. And focus on every year. You wouldn't research on this. Alright, think about it. The next one. I'll read it out. It is September. Hawkers appear with baskets of tomatoes. They are overpriced but surprisingly red. The girl's father asks her to buy 2 kilos. They would keep tomato chutney on the menu until tomatoes become wholly unaffordable in the winter. She squats at the water pump outside the stall to wash the tomatoes, facing the boy, gazing at the stuffed toe sticking out of his sandals. He is one of the few customers who prefer eating keema samosas to aloo samosas, but it is the least of the girl's concern. Their stuffings are somewhat different, but the girl makes both types of samosa with the exact same batter. They are the same thing unless one absolutely wants to differentiate, which most people do, including the girl's father, who has strictly warned her against eating keema samosas. Marxism? How? I couldn't hear you. Economical condition. So how, which is the phrase that led you to saying that? Affordable. Yeah, so the girl was gazing at the stuffed toe sticking out of the boy's sandals. Yeah. Is that the only thing that is coming up? Is there anything else? Which perspective? Feminism. How? All right. Yeah. Anything else? Is it talking? Is it giving you hints about a certain hierarchy at play? Okay, so keema samosas are not allowed. What is that? Yeah, like what the father is saying that it's better to stick to aloo. Subaltern, yeah. So what's the first thing that strikes you when you're reading
They are making both the types of samosa. Still he refused to eat keema samosa. Maybe elaborate on the samosa.
this? Okay.
And make both for your earning, but you are allowed to eat only one.
So if you're allowed to eat only one, is it telling you about something that is happening in society?
Religion?
Religious
Vegetarian
fanaticism?
is vegetarian, yes, that
Yeah.
also.
Vegetarian, non-vegetarian. So there is this idea that anyone who is eating meat, especially this boy who always orders the keema samosa, is discriminated against,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah, for certain factors, right? So you're able to understand that from this passage, right? Now let's move on to the next one. Are you familiar with this text? So the peculiarity of this text is that there are dialogue bubbles. Yeah. Where do you find dialogue bubbles? In comic books? Yeah. Graphic novels. How do you say it's a graphic novel? It has images.
Yes.
But how is the image different from, let's say, Galaxy Ocean?
It was imagery.
All right.
Has
It is
this has illustrative images.
Illustrative images or hand-drawn images. Yeah. And then there is a dialogue. Yeah. Alright. Is the text inviting you to do something? I'll just read. Can you read it? So there is a sentence before the dialogue bubble, After lunch, the men left as usual to take a nap, and the rest of us, the women, started to clean up. Alright? And then the first dialogue bubble says, Margie, my child, take care of the samovar. Alright? Yes, grandma. That's her response. That's the second dialogue bubble. And we find five people carrying various dishes. As in, illustration of five people carrying various dishes. Are you able to identify whether they are male or female? Yes. What does this image signify? So there is a grandfatherly figure and there is a guy who is gazing out, right? Yeah. What does that signify? They're waiting for some more. They're looking at something, right? They're gazing. There is the idea of gaze that comes up. So these men, these two are men, right? They're looking at, they're gazing at someone. Can you help with measurement and this one? Has to go to the next page. The image do you know what samovar is? It's a teapot, right? So, uh, which context would you associate samovar to? As in which area, which region would have samovar? Russia? You can Google it while we figure this out. A bit louder. Okay. All right. Can you read it? I'll just read it out for you. But there is an image of samovar, right? Yeah? Yeah, I'll read it out. The samovar was my responsibility. I took care of it morning, not someone He's very happy by that. The samovar was my responsibility. I took care of it morning, noon, and night. It must be said that the morning samovar didn't play exactly the same role as at other times of the day. And there is a representation of the morning samovar. So it's given within a box, indicating that, okay, do you find the interference of bubbles and titles and images distracting? No? It's doing something, right? And then uh, there is the grandmother and the granddaughter, and then the granddaughter is asking grandma, do you want a cup of tea? And she says, shut up. Right? And then the rest of it, my grandma was an opium addict. The doctor had told her to take it to lessen her pain. In any case, that's what she said. And so, on waking up and finding herself in a state of withdrawal, she was often in a very, very bad mood, but it never lasted for long. She had only to dissolve a small bit of burnt opium in her tea to regain her sense of humor and her natural kindness. It was just a matter of waiting. And there is this, there is an asterisk, like footnote, where burnt opium is described, right? So what are the elements that you see in this text? Would you call it literary, or would you take it up for research within an English studies department? Still thinking about it. You can think about it while I show you the next one. I want you to look at the images, alright? Alright. So is the text doing something to you? Is it making you hungry?
We are feeling hungry again.
Okay. Apart from that, it takes you on a culinary journey. But are you familiar with any of the food items that's been shown?
Dosa, idli, jalebi.
Hmm? Appam, dosa, dokla.
Non-veg food was also
Yeah. So there is a way in which, yeah, the details about the production team is kind of coming in.
yes.
Yeah. So what does that imply? It's a film, you can analyze a film, but there is a way in which it breaks the idea that it's a film, right? Yeah. The idea that, okay, there is the presence of these people within the frame kind of distance you from the idea that this might be a work of fiction. Yeah. What is that tendency called? That approach called? So the idea that because of the presence of these small bubble sort of thing, title sort of a thing, there is this indication that this is something that is created. This is something that has been shot and edited, yeah, yeah, which says that it might be a material reality, yeah. You think so? Now let me just take you to the galaxy dosha. What is it doing? Is that doing something similar? So you saw that the song began with dosha being made, right? So is this evoking in you that idea? Yeah. Now look at it and tell me if there are conventional notions or figures of speech that you associate when you're analyzing the poem. What are the prominent figures of speech?
Personification,
Personification, metaphors, simile.
humanitarian, interaction, irony.
Yeah. So first of all, it evokes the material reality of the creation of a dosha, right? But it's called galaxy dosha. And what I'll just read it out. So we are working with this idea of creation, right? So there are two aspects that you can read from this piece of text. One is the possibility of what we call as meta narrative. What is meta narrative? A narrative, a piece of writing that foregrounds the process that went into its writing. Are you familiar with this kind of poetry? Have you worked on E. Cummins, American literature? So this kind of poetry has its roots in E. Cummins, who is a prominent American poet. He came up with this poetry that was shaped like the objects that he wrote about. So if he wrote about a red wheelbarrow, he would write the poem by evoking the image of the red wheelbarrow. Right? So there is a sense of indication to the fact that this is a poem, this is a work of art, this is a creation that imitates reality. So the idea of the poem becoming an artistic form, a creation, by evoking the idea that it is created in a certain way. Right? So that sort of poetry is called concrete poetry, and he was influenced by the Cubist movement. He studied that as part of modernist literature. Yes. So there is a way in which image is distorted and represented in a particular way, giving it various perspectives within Cubism. Now I want you to read this again and see what are the elements of meta-narrative that comes up. So first of all, there is the idea of making a dosha, a creation. And second of all, the author is talking about creating something by looking or by using the image of this Milky Way. Yeah. Have you seen images of Milky Way? Does it look like a ghost? No? It's round, spiral. Okay. But he is kind of alluding to the fact that while he is making dosha, he is a creator who is like the god who created the Milky Way, something of that sort. Alright. So how would you analyze this text? You can answer that. Alright. Now the next image that I showed you is a Studio Ghibli film called Spirited Away. Yeah. So Studio Ghibli is famous for engaging with animation. Yeah. But also bringing in the tradition of Japanese manga. Yeah. So it's a way of storytelling, but by using different mediums, which takes me to this idea of intermediality. So in today's research scene, we look at text from different mediums, and my question to you is, what are the factors that would come into play when you are working with different mediums, apart from a literal text? Even when you're looking at a text with words, it's an example of concrete poetry. It's an example of a text that will have meta-narrative possibilities. Yeah? So when you're looking at, let's say, Spirited Away, you have to be aware of Japanese manga. You have to be aware of how Studio Ghibli is creating revolutionizing the animation industry. Perhaps writing back is something that we are all familiar with when we do post-colonial studies, right? So it's in a way critiquing the homogenized way in which Hollywood has been, or Walt Disney has been, you know, prominently engaging with animated films, right? So there is an alternative discourse that is created. So if you were to work on this, you have to kind of engage with these aspects. You should have a familiarity with Japanese manga. You should have an idea of where animated films began and where it has reached, and a sort of a Eurocentric or a Western point of view. Even when you're looking at narratives like Cinderella, Snow White, yeah. So there is a way in which the female characters uh, are projected as a spectacle, right? As an object, right? Whereas when you're coming to Studio Ghibli films, there is a way in which it foregrounds childhood, it foregrounds innocence. It doesn't in a way engage with a lot of discrimination that's there within animation, right? So there is a way in which the intrinsic knowledge system or the indigenous knowledge system, the art form of Japan comes into play. So you have to be a bit open to understanding what Japanese cultural scene is when you're researching on this. Now, crab apples. This is a poem by Imtiaz Darkar. She's a diasporic writer. Yeah. So clearly you were able to pick out metaphors from this which indicated that she is a writer, the author is a diasporic writer. Right? And you are able to engage with this literary text, but then you will have to bring in certain theoretical inputs from diaspora studies. Now how would you engage with this? It's a meme. It's circulated in Facebook, Instagram, but there is a lot of work that is done on memes. Yeah? So that's also a possible text that you can take up for research. Now this is the short story by Kritika Pandey, The Great Indian Snacks and Tea. Alright? And it won her the 2020 Commonwealth Prize. Right? And we see that there is a certain way in which this story, through metaphors, evokes certain social hierarchies. So how would you, what would be the disciplinary boundary that you will be crossing when you're analyzing this? Of course, there is the gender criticism that we discussed about. There is a way in which this narrative kind of indicates the need to know about a particular social system, social situation. Yeah? All of this informs your research. Now, this is a graphic fiction, Persepolis. Have you heard about that? So we have already discussed this as in how to analyze it. Graphic fiction, in the title itself, you know that there will be the presence of visual elements to it and also textual elements to it. Right? It's also an upcoming area where we will be emphasizing more on visuality, uh, looking at the emergence of this particular genre which can be taken back to comic books. Right? And this, of course, is a sort of a critique of, again, the DC Marvel comics and how it has been revamped and all of that. Okay? So when you're looking at this, you need to borrow methodological interventions from visuality studies. And the last sample that we looked at was a song from a film, and we already discussed a bit of it. But then when you are engaging with the critique or with the analysis of a film, you need to be aware of the language of cinema. So the language of cinema comprises of various shots, long shots, camera angles, all of that, and also the editing technique. So there is a way in which a film as a text needs to be analyzed through elements or methodological intervention from film studies. So when you are taking up a film for analysis, it's not, if you're just looking at a plot line, it doesn't do justice to your research. You need to be aware of the discipline of film studies, right? Now, just a sort of a summing up, we began with the idea of text, and we saw the way in which there is a difference in the way in which we use books and text. Yeah? So when you're looking at books, it takes us again back to the 18th century where publishing industry comes up, and it's a battle of books, like Jonathan Swift talks about. So it's the books, right? And at some point in time from 1960s, largely because of the intervention of cultural studies, the Birmingham School, are you familiar with that? Yeah, that's with that the establishment of cultural studies. Also, there is a shift towards understanding the idea of text from a different angle. So there is books, there is text, and now when we're looking at all these texts, we had to connect to a context to understand the text, right? So when you're looking at the journey of, let's say, English department to English studies department, it basically engages with this idea from books to text to context, all right? Now, and the next thing that I want you to engage with is the question that I began with. Is the text inviting you to do something? Right? So that would be the connection. And what to do with this connection would ultimately lead to your research question. Right? What to do with this connection you have established and why do you need to engage with it? So these are questions that comes up after you have done your pre-writing stage, after you are done with your, which is the first stage. So it involves a lot of your skills. Your skills at identifying text, your skills at recognizing a larger context that is foregrounded, right? Basically data collection. So from there, you ask the question, what is the connection which leads you to a research methodology, perhaps, which leads you to textual analysis and then to a methodology, alright? And once you are done that, you will in a way understand that research within English studies is not defined by any boundaries. Alright? And it is important for you to situate yourself within the text and the context to engage with your research or to make your research more fruitful. Now, I have in a way given you an idea about woke, but then this particular idea is reflected through three practices in a way because it's important for you to understand the context. It's important for you to be open to different ideas. And here I've got an article which talks about woke interventions. Uh, so you need to have an awareness about alternative identities and you have to make sure that even in your research, you're looking at Dalit narratives. In your research, you should not take up a derogatory stance against Dalits. So you need to be aware of their situation and never use a word that is offensive. Then there is this idea of how you should be accurate about your data, as in accurate about your analysis. You cannot afford to bring in inaccuracy or you cannot just foreground certain prejudices that exist. So research involves questioning prejudices and moving beyond that. And the last practice would be to kind of foreground the need for them to have a place within the society at large. Right? So there is a way in which research within English studies today contributes largely to the betterment of the society as well. It's not just a means of writing something or just coming up with a dissertation really normal. It's also a way in which we are kind of foregrounding the idea of liberal arts. Right? Now I end with this quote from Catherine Belsey's essay, Textual Analysis as a Research Method. So it was Catherine Belsey who talked about this idea that a text should invite you to do something with it. The text should, that is the criteria for you to choose a text to study, right? And she's talking about research, right? So earlier we were looking about the death of the author, which led to the death, to the emergence of the reader, or the idea that the situatedness of the reader is important to make sense, or the idea that there are contexts and not texts, all right? But when you're doing research, are you a reader? a reader. But would that perspective help you in doing research? That's where the idea of context comes in. We discussed galaxy dosha, right? While we were discussing that, I talked about E. Timmins and his work, The Red Wheel Barrow. We talked about concrete poetry. So, when you're doing research, if you're doing research in galaxy dosha, it is important for you to move beyond your idea as a reader. You are a researcher, so you would engage with the reader of, let's say, contemporary poetry that emerged in the 1920s, how it was received. That's where the reader really comes into play. So, as a researcher in 21st century, it is important for you to go back to the 1920s and understand where contemporary poetry emerged from and trace the evolution and then reach Galaxy Dosha and the analysis of it. So you're not a mere reader here. You're someone who connects with the various readers of that poem. Alright? So that's what Catherine Wellesley is saying. Meaning is not anchored in anything outside signification itself, and the signifying process supplants it. All we can be sure of, in other words, is the signifier, and this cannot be tied to any unique reading to end all readings. On the contrary, meanings are always ultimately undesirable. Paradoxically, this is good news for PhD students in English and cultural criticism, and good news too for research in its entirety. There is literally no end to it, but there is a great deal of work to be done in the process of exploring all the possible avenues. Let's close on that note, and I wish you the best in all your research endeavors. Thank you.
No, no. After your time. You can take your mic.
Very loudly. Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening all of us. We enjoyed your lecture, and it was with this you have presented all these photos and various images and even film. And I like so much your Malayali food because I enjoyed it last December. I remembered it, and then I thought I'll go again and to eat in Kerala. So very happy. Now you talked about research here and about the data analysis, text analysis, literature review, research methodology, feminist perspective, national education policy, and you talk about folk songs and idea of the text. Then through photos and pictures also you use. So it is, we can say, that more powerful. And we find no derogatory remarks also that you say that we should write all healthy ideas like nobody should feel insulted, right? And meta narrative and many good new ideas you give. So I am very grateful to you on behalf of the department, all students, my colleagues. I am very thankful to you. Thank you, ma'am. Now, anybody, this paper is open for the discussion. You can ask questions. You can add something, you can comment, or you can have new interpretation. Please, I welcome you all.
He has already answered a lot of questions.
If you want mic, then you can.
So I'm saying you have already answered a lot of questions. So if you have questions, I'll try to answer. Are you hungry?
No. Matt, you have talked about the various way of researching text,
Hmm.
like I mean, film study, graphic, and various things. So it means that one particular text can be seen in multiple perspectives, and that perspective in which that particular text has been seen can be questioned in another perspective, as you just talked about that of the author. So that particular idea has been challenged in new historicism, and that structuralism and new criticism has both of the things have been challenged in post-structuralism and deconstruction theory. So I would say that if there is a particular text has been written in any form and in anything, so I don't think so that there is no way to question that particular research or the text. Right? So can you enlighten us that if if I just want to base my research idea, I want to just lay my research on new, let's say new criticism. I should not be afraid of new stories. How should I be, learned about that? Please.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So thank you for that question. It's a very important one when you're doing research. So you talked about various perspectives and also talked about the first stage of the research process. Do you remember? Yeah.
Collecting data, right? So what you've described now is that process where you look at the text and look at how there is a new historical intervention coming in, right? So when you've chosen a text, you look at whatever has been written on that text. That's the ideal way to go about it. You would have a working bibliography, right? And then you would narrow down your focus onto, let's say, something, right? So as you have suggested, there is new criticism, new historicism. You are not happy with the way in which the new historicist perspective has been used. So you would try to question that. That would be your research question. That should be the focus of your research. But in order for you to arrive at that point, it is important that you read everything, or not everything, but whatever you have access to on the text, uh, which culminates in the literature review or annotated bibliography, and that can be used within your research. So it's important that you engage with at least, let's say, I don't know, like 5 perspectives and come to a gap, which could be also a new perspective and a critique of an older perspective. No, nothing can be taken together. That's one of the unique things about English studies, right? We cannot work the way in which the hard sciences work, where there is a hypothesis and we prove something right or wrong. In our case, we largely work with context. We engage with this idea of pluriversality. So that's what the last quote that showed and that I read out implied. So meaning is never singular, it's plural. So a researcher should be able to engage with that, but there is a problem to that, there is a challenge to that, which is that you cannot kind of come up with any sort of interpretation, which then would make it subjective, right? So there is a challenge where you have to be aware of all the narratives. You have a particular feeling about a text, but it's not possible for you to engage with subjectivity. That's the other extreme. No, you cannot be subjective.
Actually, whatever you are saying, it is postmodernism, postmodernist study. That meaning has word has multiple meanings.
Yeah.
And
So now we live in the era of post-truth.
yeah, post truth, and there is a grand narrative. It questions grand narrative. It questions readerly text and writerly text.
Yeah.
So whatever you have just talked so far,
Mm-hmm.
based on readerly,
Yeah.
writerly text. So the writer's role is minimal in the text. So it is completely on reader, that how is text will be analyzed by the readers.
Mm.
So there could be multiple meanings, as you have also talked about that social,
Mm.
signifier and signifier. So signifier can be multiple,
Yeah.
and that particular notion has been challenged by Delhi.
Yeah.
So in that case, I cannot take two things together. If I am working on new criticism, I cannot touch new historicism. If I will be touching new historicism, my entire argument will be challenged.
Yeah. But you are a researcher, not a reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you will say there is a gap that new criticism is bringing up, but new criticism is largely a formalist approach, right? You're looking at the form largely.
Yes.
Yeah, but when you're looking at structuralism, post-structuralism, they are kind of bringing in context.
Yes.
Yeah, so that these two are completely different perspectives. But as a researcher, first of all, you're not a reader, you're a researcher. So you need to be aware of how a reader in, let's say, we are looking at Hamlet, right? So you should be aware of how Hamlet was received when it was published, sorry, when it was first enacted, right? You have to be aware of how today Hamlet has been approached to the medical humanities perspective. So right from the 15th century to the 21st century, as a researcher, you should be aware of how in each epoch Hamlet was read by someone. Yeah. So that is your role as a researcher. So you have to, yeah.
You have given a good example. Let me just take example with further.
Okay.
I want to study Hamlet with the perspective of new criticism.
Okay.
New criticism. That is my aim.
Hmm.
So I just want to deal with the text,
Hmm.
not the historical background and anything about Hamlet, how it has been performed and whatever. It has been just put aside. And
Can it be put aside?
no. If I'm just applying the structural thing, the structure of the text, form of the text, and the
Mhm.
new historicism for say of the text, so it will put everything aside, the historical perspective.
But if you are forgetting the fact that it's part of Elizabethan theatre, would the formalist approach work?
So that's what I'm saying. It can't work. So how can I deal with new
That is
criticism?
what new criticism is saying. That is what his argument
So
is.
you will have to engage with that.
When I get with that,
Huh.
my new criticism will not be there.
It will not be there.
You can do a comparative analysis. You can apply both to a particular
So how would
text.
you define Hamlet then, based on the form?
So there can be two kind of studies. As Sir said,
No, you are doing a new criticism. You are looking at it from the formalist standpoint,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So how would you define the form then?
form as it is already been defined in formalism. Form
No, I'm talking about you're studying Hamlet from the formalist perspective.
I'll see the form, the metaphor and that kind of
Close reading of the text.
close reading of the text, the sentences, the structure of dialogues, and how what kind of that argumentative text can be dealt with.
Mhm.
So the text, whatever is written in Hamlet, I will deal with the form of the text, particularly the form of the text.
But it was first performed, right?
What is the question again?
New criticism and new
Finding it
historicism.
difficult. Yeah.
He is finding it difficult to bring in two perspectives in the analysis of the
I'm not
text.
giving my, I'm sorry, but I'm giving this, it is new criticism and new historicism. I'm just giving example.
Yeah.
But my main question is that if I apply one theory, let's say two theory, structuralism, structuralism, formalism, and new criticism. My entire thesis is based on that. So there are possibilities that other theories which are there, can challenge my thesis.
Yes, of
Yes.
course.
Yeah.
That is research.
And if I just don't want to be afraid and want to be argumentative about it, what kind of answer should I have?
No, no,
So
no.
basically, you should do a literature review.
Yeah, no. And in the first session, what Sir said, that whatever you write, it should be supported by evidences in terms of data, right? And there will be difference of opinion.
No.
So you don't have to be afraid of what people are going to say,
Yeah.
provided you have enough data to support your argument. If you have to be afraid when you have not collected enough data, then you have to be afraid.
So the first step would be to collect all the perspectives that
Yeah.
have been brought in to analyze Hamlet.
True.
So right now, I guess Hamlet has been analyzed. Is being analyzed through game theory and medical humanities perspectives. So a research scholar who's bringing in that perspective would have to ultimately go through all the perspectives ever used to analyze Hamlet. So that's the first stage, collection of data, and then you analyze these data and come to this idea that already psychoanalytic perspective has been used, but there is more scope to it. You need to bring in formalist approach. You can do that, but then you have to say that this is the gap in the research, and I want to address it. Yeah. So you cannot be afraid. There's no need for you to be afraid if you have done your data collection well. Yeah.
In fact, others have to worry about it.
Oh, everyone is worried about that.
No,
Okay.
other people who are challenging your work
Okay.
and they have done everything on surface level. There are
Yeah.
people who talk like surface level things and claiming many things,
Hmm.
but depth knowledge is zero.
Yeah.
After 3-4 sentences, after claiming something, they don't have anything,
Yeah.
and they don't enter into discussion.
Yeah.
They just have 4-5 sentences at surface level
Yeah.
without enough data, and after that they cannot communicate or continue with the discussion further.
True. So there is a need for you to be open to ideas because we work with context. Yeah.
He is working on disability in
Oh.
Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Oh, lovely.
That's his research topic. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Thank you.
He was
We're
forced
asking
to.
more than enough.
He was forced to ask a
No,
question.
but interesting discussion. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Any other student, please?
How many of you would take up research after your PG?
No, after this workshop.
Okay. After this workshop. I hope I am not intimidated you more.
No, no.
It's an interesting thing to do research, especially today because you can engage with a lot of areas. So there is no limitation on you,
You have to
particularly when you are in the English studies department.
You have to fall in love with research.
But fall in love, but bring in boundaries. Otherwise, you'll be like researching for 10 years.
Whole life.
Yeah. As in, you'll be researching your entire life, but then you have to be really practical about it, and you have to write a dissertation and submit it. So, not being in love with the text might help you better.
But it was said in the earlier session.
Yeah, you should
session
be
that,
connected to
your
it.
completion of PhD, doctoral research, is the beginning of your research.
Yeah. Only few students ask questions. Why is it so? Others are, we can say, not. They are very silent, not active,
I think they
and
are all
only
hungry.
Sarju and 1, 2, 3 students are talking here. So this is development for all. Everybody is invited to ask questions. Please.
And I also introduce a lot of perspectives, disciplines in the work. Is there any question related to that?
પૂછો બીજા પણ પૂછો. In Gujarati I say, not only 1 or 2 students ask. All are intelligent, everybody is studying here, right? So, don't keep quiet. Teaching learning is a two-way process. Not only the resource person will speak and you will just listen to it.
So to learn to unlearn. So
I welcome you.
So if you
ask
have the
questions.
tendency
I
not to
support
ask
you, I help you.
questions, please do now after my work. After this, you have to do something. You have to learn.
Matangi?
when we talk about this woke classrooms, it
Mm-hmm.
has this highly predetermined ideological environment.
Mm-hmm.
So we might end up prioritizing our feelings or social media trends over data and logic sometimes. So to what extent it could risk the academic objectivity, and how can we avoid that? If we embrace this woke paradigm or perspective, as we say.
See, research today is not looked at through a singular lens. You know, there is no sense of singularity today. So everything is plural. Like when I use the term post-truth, it means that there is not no one truth. There are many truths. But as a researcher, what you should be aware of is to like you have a colleague or a peer who's from a different background. Just because that person is different, it doesn't mean that you stop yourself from engaging with that, right? So that's also what you do in research. You take up a new area, you take up a new perspective. You will have to engage with that perspective, not as an outsider perhaps, but someone who tries to be part of that community. So we also talk about inclusivity nowadays, right? In a classroom space, there will be people from different belief systems and different regions who speak different languages, who eat different things. But if you have an understanding of where they are coming from, uh, it kind of uh, takes you away from that subjectivity that you're talking about. It brings in an objectivity to look at your peer, right? And of course, social media is influencing us a lot by kind of projecting only certain narratives. That's also problematic. But you know that social media is doing that, right? So you could try to see one way of trying to reach truth would be to read at least four newspapers a day because each newspaper would bring in their own ideology to the interpretation of the truth. So multiple perspectives perhaps. You can look at multiple narratives. Yeah. I hope it, but it's too difficult to do that today.
We have still time, 15 minutes more. So I invite questions from MS students. Moin.
Ma'am, I have a question. Like when we are conducting research, say in this dosa poetry, the shape poetry, so
Concrete poetry.
concrete poetry. So it is if we incorporate it in a research, so it would be very limited. We can talk about it from after having done the close reading,
Mm-hmm.
but to explain it in say post-colonial terms or the Indian writing terms, for example, like the word chutney. So how can we write more on that? Because it would be very limited. What you what I was saying.
Limited in what sense? You know about dosha, right? Yeah. You trace the evolution of this form of poetry, which will take you back to modernism, right? And then you will question why the modernists wrote in a certain way. Then you will know that because of the world wars, they were disillusioned and their reality was fragmented and they had to come up with an alternate way of engaging with their self. So that would be something that you will be looking at when you are looking at the evolution, right? Evolution of concrete poetry. But when you are looking at Galaxy Dosha, first off, it engages with the idea of creativity, right? And there is a unique way in which the author is placing, the poet is placing himself at the center of the universe, right, as a creator. So there is a way in which you can look at the structural aspect of it, as in the features of it, uh, and look at how it fits into the genre of concrete poetry. That's one way of looking at it. The next way would be to look at it from the perspective of critical food studies. You know, why dosha? You know, you could have chosen anything else. What does dosha represent on a global scene, right?
Is there a universalization happening? So you can bring in any questions. You can look at it thematically. You can look at it in terms of understanding the evolution of the genre. All of that. And there is meta-narrative perspective that you can bring in.
Very important. Food. From childhood to about death. We do it the maximum time, right? This activity. So
The food is
it
not
can,
just about sustaining yourself.
yeah,
You can also do research on food.
on food also. Now any other student? Janvi Pawar, Farhina, Aarti.
While I was doing
Because
the
we have time,
presentation,
resource person, the scholar, intelligent person is sitting here. So you can have some new ideas.
well reminded of any text.
Yes, Aarti.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned this specifically, could you elaborate on food studies, which is part of cultural studies?
Yeah.
Subject?
Yeah.
But how do we study it from humanities perspective? Like, do we have to refer to some text the way you use a lot of texts were directly related to food studies? So how do we go about it?
See, one thing that critical food studies talks about is foregrounding this idea that superficially we look at food as a mere means of sustenance. But when you're looking at the origins of civilization, we define that through uh, food practices in the presence of food. Specifically, we're looking at culture as a term that comes from agriculture. So there is a way in which food has been part of our life even beyond the idea of sustaining us. And when you're looking at food studies, it is connected with other critical disciplines. For instance, you can use aspects from food studies in engaging with Dalit studies. So there is this text called Jutan, which talks about the condition of Dalit untouchability, um, and the question of purity and pollution, all of that through food. So basically, when you analyze texts through food, beyond the literary sense or beyond the metaphorical sense, there is this engagement with material reality. You know, so that could be one thing that you can talk about. So when we were discussing Galaxy Gosha, for instance, that comes out very prominently. Right, there is a material reality there. So that's one way of looking at it, but mostly the dynamics between metaphorics and materiality is central to critical food studies. And it's interdisciplinary. So when you're looking at gender studies, a woman's body as something uh, that is consumed, the body of the mother, so all of that, there are a lot of works being done on that.
And if we see it from cultural studies perspective, as far as I have known, it is something related to tracing the history of that particular cuisine or a
Yeah.
food item. So, does this intermingle when we are studying from literary perspective, from as a humanities student? Do we cross that boundaries?
When you're looking at food studies, we do. We do. Uh, okay. So let me give you an example of how the discipline emerged in India. For instance, it emerged because of diasporic writers. Yeah. I don't know whether you're familiar with Jhumpa Lahiri. Yeah. So her writing is filled with a lot of food imageries, right? So the thing is that it was through the evocation of these food that they connected to their reality, right? Um, so, and also this whole idea of chutneyfication, all of that happens with, yeah, 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 Rashmi. But then there is this term McDonaldization. When you go to McDonald's in India, you will have tikka, chicken tikka, burger, all of that. So, in a way, it's with post-liberalization, the emergence of Indian diaspora, that engagement with food studies begins. But there is also this other side to food studies where Indian food is homogenized, for instance. So if you go now, things have changed. But if for someone in America, Indian food would be butter chicken and naan, right? In Canada also. So there was a time when Indian food was associated with a particular cuisine, which is not the reality. So within food studies, we are trying to engage with heterogeneity and trying to question this whole idea of homogenizing cuisines. And also looking at the impact of colonizations. For instance, potato, it's not intrinsic to our region. So if you're looking at all the major food items that's part of our diet, most of them are not intrinsic to India. So there is a way in which post-humanism comes to the forefront where we're looking at indigenous knowledge systems. So you have year of the millets. So all that is happening. So there is a way in which food studies is related to policy making, to the healthcare sector, to medical humanities, like that. Yeah. Great, good question.
One more, maybe last question. Meet, yeah.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I would like to request you if possible send this handout for us in a PDF format so we can use as a reference. And my I have two questions. First, can you what you have done in disability studies and what if anybody wants to do? Can you recommend some modern ideas for them so they can dive into this research? Another question is, you have done with food study. So do you have any idea regarding coffee and English studies? I tried to look at somewhere, but I could not get success, so I thought let us ask you now.
Okay. A lot of questions.
In one question, many sub questions.
So what am I doing with disability studies is the question. So I'm largely engaging with the category of invisible disabilities, persons who are diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar disorder. So these are disabilities that you are not aware of. Not aware of in the sense that, let me give you an example. If at a traffic signal there is someone who is visually disabled, there is a tendency for us to help that person out, whether the person requires help or otherwise. So there is a way in which we are aware of certain disabilities. But someone with ADHD, which is attention deficit, yeah, you're familiar with that. So for such a person, it's also they also find themselves in a vulnerable position when they are at a traffic signal. But we are not aware of such individuals because it's not visible. So I work with invisible disability, and also I try to engage with or try to kind of bring in the elements from critical food studies and disability studies also. Particularly, I look at spaces, accessibility, etc. Yeah. And the next question is regarding coffee. Coffee and research in coffee.
No, no, coffee with the English studies, something you have done. Apart from Victorian literature, I would like to hear from you.
Coffee. Alright. I'm reminded of Habermas, who talks about the need for coffee to write. Yeah, you need a cup of coffee to write. And also we have the concept of public sphere associated with coffee houses. Yeah. And you are familiar with that? What? Coffee. I'll have to think about that a bit more. Yeah.
So, ma'am, I want
Anyways,
to know.
coffee is not intrinsic to India. It was brought to India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. No, ma'am, I want to know if somebody wants to go for disability studies, then what is the recommendation
Recommendation then in terms of text.
in terms of research?
Okay.
So I will tell you in brief. I would go with print disabilities. So recommend like this.
You would go with?
print disabilities.
Print disability. So you want to work on that and you need my intervention.
I would like to draw some attention what we can do further. So at least I can get some idea.
Okay, do you have any specific text in mind?
No, not yet, ma'am. Not specific text on my mind right now.
Okay. So you're talking about accessibility issues then.
Accessibility issues. Yes, lots of we can discuss. It will. Lots of issues we have discussed. But if we can go, then we can do research. But still, I I
See,
can't.
I think you can begin by critiquing the models of disability.
Models of disabilities.
Yeah. The moral model, the medical model, the charity model, and then come to social model.
Okay, got
Yeah.
your point.
Yeah. And there is a text by Tom Sullivan. If you could see what I hear, that could be a text that you can look at. Tom Sullivan. Yeah.
There are other critics as well,
Sharon Snyder.
Snyder's and the one
David Mitchell.
one prominent, the field, the theory within the disability field, I would like to be crip,
Crip literature,
yeah,
crip poetry.
crip poetry.
Yeah.
So it talks about embracing heredity. So
It talks about engaging with the material reality of a person with disability.
yeah, Robert Buchanan talks about that.
Yeah.
In 2007, he talks about crip,
Crip poetics.
crip poetry. So it talks about that embracing such terms
Mm-hmm.
which we, visible people have been seen by putting on that certain labels. So that labels have will cannot be taken away that easily. So it would be fine that just embrace that and just go for it. So that
Yeah.
crip theory is about just embrace the word with crip. Crip comes from cripple.
Yeah. So it came up in response to the idea of using disability as a mere plot device. If you're looking at canonical works, that's how it has been done. And there is a romanticization of disabled individuals. So it was initiated by this work of David Mitchell and Sharon Snyder called narrative prosthesis, uh, wherein like, the term itself gives you the idea. So they say that within literature, disability has been used as a prosthesis, as something that takes forward the narrative, which essentially takes away the reality of being disabled.
Rosemary Marlin
Thompson, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Any other question?
Krishna.
You're forcing them. It
I
seems
will,
like a
Krishna,
punishment.
she raised. Actually, she
Oh,
went
yeah.
last.
Okay.
Last, no, other than you can talk to her later.
I have a question about the theories particularly. Like Sanju said that two approaches how can apply to the one particular text. My question is totally against of it. I have a one text and two similar theories, and how can I choose the one particular theory is applicable for the particular text? Like if I can talk about the Dalit women, there were according to my read, there were two major theories like a Spivak's theory and the second one is intersectionality by Crenshaw. So the both are applicable for the particular text or for the Dalit women, right? So how can a researcher, goes through the particular theory that how can I apply it and how can I apply this among those two theories?
See, first and foremost, you have to understand the context from where these theories are coming. So intersectionality is, it was first used to engage with black women, or which led to the third wave of feminism. Yeah, third wave of feminism, where you engage with alterations, right? So if you're using that to engage with Dalit women, you are kind of totally taking it out of context. So you need to be aware of that. when you're doing research. And when it comes to subaltern perspective, also there is a way in which the Dalit women are not represented in that perspective, right? So they are not yet considered as the mainstream. So there is problem with the subaltern theory as well as the theory of intersectionality. And I would say you look at critics like Sharmila Rege, who has worked on Dalit women. So it's important that you, yeah, it's okay for you to refer to subaltern and intersectionality, but you have to say that there is a way in which certain sections are still not represented, right? There is a way in which discrimination works on many levels.
Okay. Oh, they are
Thank
my
you so
MA
much.
students.
You are punishing them, I think,
So,
by forcing them to ask questions.
2 hours I took, right? And I just not force, but
And I hope the session was helpful for you.
I didn't force you, but actually I wanted that you should take knowledge, whatever she has. So thank you. Now no question. Okay? And thanks, I'm very grateful to you now for that. They are my MA students and PhD